Now let's dive into a topic with great relevance for our region, caregiving. Social norms have traditionally assigned caregiving responsibilities to women inside and outside of the home. Data shows that in the region, women devote more than twice the hours than men to unpaid housework, including caregiving. As a result, one of the three pillars of our new IDB Group employment framework with a gender perspective focuses on strengthening the region's care system. Let's discuss. I am pleased to introduce our panelist, Caridad Araujo, Division Chief, Gender Diversity and Inclusion, Pablo Ibarrarán, Principal Specialist, Social Protection and Health Division, Ana Maria Tribin, Public Policy Specialist, UNDP, and Jennifer Okudili, Deputy Director, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Caridad, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria Elena. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is a pleasure to be speaking with such a distinguished panel today about this very important topic, the economics of caregiving. What have we learned during the pandemic about the urgency to act upon this issue? Where are the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of thinking about their caregiving systems? And what are the economic consequences of this lack of supply of a service that is so essential? And we're very fortunate to have with us the three panelists that Maria Elena kindly introduced. So I'd suggest we quickly jump into a conversation. And I'm going to start with a question for Ana Maria. Ana Maria, what does it mean when we hear that societies internalize the benefits of caregiving, but not its costs? Could you explain to us a little bit more about the economic impacts of this issue?
Well, thank you very much for this invitation. Well, care is absolutely necessary for humanity to survive. Care is needed for humans to grow and flourish since the day they are conceived. Evidence shows that the investment in early childhood has enormous economic returns and is key to close the gaps between poor and rich. Elders and people with disabilities need special care, specialized care, for them to be able to overcome difficulties and the obstacles they have to face. They need high quality care to be able to be productive and feel productive, and also to acquire new skills. A lot of evidence shows that people that perform this kind of care for elders, for example, they face a high rates of depression. So we really need a specialized care, people that can face with these challenges, and because otherwise we are going to end up with problems for caregivers and also for the care recipients. Still, the society don't give enough value to care, and its provision remain gendered. And that has a lot of implications for gender equality, because it's a border of care that women has to have, and that prevent them to participate in the labor market. That has a lot of externalities. They become dependent. They can face with a higher probability domestic violence, for example. And Nancy Folbrecht, for example, start to ask this question: why we don't value the care? And the answer is that it's associated with women. It looks like a feminine thing, and the social norms prevent to recognize its value, even if it's very important. A lot of jobs related with paid care, like childcare, teaching, therapy, and nursing, offer a low pay, even if they require a lot of skills and education. So we as a society have to internalize the cost of care, because otherwise it will be always undervalued, low quality, and done in an unpaid way, especially by women. So we are going to keep these gaps between men and women, don't allow women to enter into workforce, or for those that can enter into the workforce, we are giving them this load that gives them a double shift And also we have all the recipients that are not getting the best quality of care. That could be key for them to be productive and to help the development and growth of the country. So, for example, in Latin America, women on average are more educated than men, but they perform 74% of the unpaid care work and domestic work. That's a lot of work that they have to do compared with men. So, of course, we have the women participated in lower rates than men. Before the pandemic, they were participating 60% of them were participating, while men were participating 80%. And think about an economist. This is not efficient if you have these two sets of people and one has higher education than the other. Well, you expect that group to be in the market. And now we have a worse problem with the pandemic, where the majority of women are not in the labor market.
Thanks, Ana Maria. Well, it's a very good introduction that you've laid the ground of the big picture of the economic issues related to caregiving. But I'm going to ask Pablo to dig in a little deeper in terms of a more micro issue and how unpaid caregiving is directly affecting labor markets, and specifically labor markets and women's participation in them.
Thank you very much, Caridad. I'm very happy to share the panel with you and Ana Maria. Then I think it's clear that unpaid caregiving is the cornerstone of the care economy. And as Ana Maria pointed, the care economy is essential for the functioning of all the overall economy. And we have the data that shows that women, not only they work much more in taking care of family members. When we do computations, we see that there's about 20% of GDP that's unaccounted for because it's the care that is provided by women in the household, unpaid care. And we know that women that take care of family members have a lower participation rate, about 10 or 15 percentage points less. And then of those who still are in the labor market, they work less hours than men, about 20% less. So this is a double effect against productivity, because they will be accumulating less skills and will be able to contribute less to the economy. They will be having lower formalization rates, so they will not be able to get pensions, because this is largely informal work. So it is a burden, because women, given the social norms that we have, do provide much more care than men. We have evidence also. For example, there's a longitudinal study that we were able to do in Mexico, trying to analyze the impact that it has on participation when suddenly a parent needs care. So it's like a shock where people are working, parents need care, and we see that women stop working, and those who keep working work less hours. But we see no effect on men. So this is also very important. Not only we can document that caregiving has an impact on women, but it has a very differential impact. And this is something that we were able to establish. And there's also a huge literature in terms of how the labor force participation and performance of women changed a lot, whether or not they have children, whether they live with parents or not. And in the case of men, we see basically the same participation in terms of jobs, hours, and so on. So the fact that there's lack of caregiving services is really something that prevents the full participation of women in the labor force. There's many studies that show that GDP could increase if we take use of those huge resources that are right now prevented because they're doing care work at home.
Thank you so much, Pablo. And that's a great segue into the following question that is for Jan. Jan, in the context of the crisis, we've seen a lot of discussion on caregiving in the media. Only in the last few days, there were major pieces in the Washington Post and the New York Times, and this wasn't happening a few years ago. Why is that happening? And do you expect this issue to remain in the public discussion with this level of importance in the near future?
Yes. So first, thank you so much for having me here today. It's just a real pleasure to speak with Ana Maria and Pablo on this panel and to discuss this important topic. And I'm honored to be participating along such critical thought leaders here today. So just to your question, I think in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, the economics of caregiving have received an increased amount of attention in the media and in public discussion because the pandemic has exposed just how devastating this economic gender divide is across high income and low income countries alike. I mean, women have been hit harder than men in the global recession. The uptick of coverage and conversation is a reflection that care has become politically salient in a way that has been unprecedented in global and country level context before. I do believe that the economics of care is a policy issue that has long-lasting relevance. I think as we build toward together this post-COVID future, ensuring an equitable economic recovery is one of the Gates Foundation's highest priorities, and central to that is gender equality. The pandemic has shown not just that economic losses have been gendered, but it's also made clear that a successful economic recovery with long-term resilience can only be achieved with women and girls at the core. And so as Pablo was sharing, the data on this is really clear. I think emerging analysis by our partners at Eurasia Group have found that providing access to childcare for women currently lacking it could deliver an additional 2.6 to $3.6 trillion of GDP each year in low-income countries and low and middle-income countries. A key priority for our Women's Economic Empowerment Program at the Gender Equality Division is expanding women's labor force participation. And we know that when parents can't return to the workforce unless their children are safe and in nurturing environments. Our research has also shown that access to high quality, affordable childcare is going to generate multiple positive externalities. So first, building a childcare economy offers substantial employment opportunities. Second, explaining childcare can yield multi-generational impacts by promoting equity and improving women's economic productivity, child development, nutritional outcomes, family welfare, business productivity, etc. And finally, modeling from our partners at the ILO shows that even in the short run, a substantial portion of fiscal spending on care can be recovered through increased employment, as Pablo again was alluding to, through tax revenues and larger effects in the long run. So I think the data here is clear, and it's really been exciting to see the media sort of catch on to this. It's not a new problem, it's not a new issue, but we're seeing within this pandemic, it's got increased salience and urgency to it, which is really great.
Thank you, Jen. Now let's focus a little bit more in our region. In the last few years, even before the pandemic, the Inter-American Development Bank has been working with countries in the region that have been starting to establish caregiving systems as part of their core social policies. And in fact, some of that work has been led by Pablo. Pablo, tell us a little bit more. How are those systems shaping up and what challenges are they encountering?
Thank you, Caridad. I think it's important to point that Latin America is a very young region, but it is aging very fast, the fastest aging region in the world. So this means that caregiving has two challenges. One is taking care of young children, all of whom need to be provided care. But also, we need to take care of the older persons that need a care due to their functional dependency. That's about 20 or 30% of older persons. So this is a double challenge that the region is facing. And it has been recognized, or the agenda on child development and quality childcare has been in the public realm for a while. That topic about care provided to older persons is more recent in the agenda. And it is very interesting that in Latin America, both issues come together from a gender perspective, because there is a clear sense, as we have discussed in the previous answers, about the role of women in providing care, unpaid care, and that being a burden for them. So the systems in Latin America are being shaped by this discussion from a gender perspective. And while we have a very important focus on the quality of care and the well-being of the persons who receive this care, it is also very important to recognize the gender dimension, to work on the recognition, reduction, and redistribution of care, and developing care systems that will allow to have better care and for women to join the labor market and work in other areas, having the responsibility of care not being imposed on them, shared with men. So this is also a change that needs to be taken in terms of the social discussion. So countries in the region are building these systems with this double perspective. This is very interesting. This is not what happens in other regions. And we're working very closely with our partners in developing the operational, the technical tools, how to build the systems, which services to provide, how to ensure quality. And just to finalize this answer, I think a key question that is shared both in terms of care for children and for older persons, and also for persons with disabilities that have high support needs, is the need to invest in human resources, to train people and to create a good career path so that caregiving becomes a good job and something that people look forward to doing in their career.
Thank you, Pablo. That's very encouraging. Jen, tell us a little bit more about the experience Gates Foundation has had in terms of piloting interventions precisely aimed at alleviating the burden of unpaid work. What have you learned from these interventions?
Yeah, so what we've learned is that the need is compelling. I'm sure you all are familiar with the widely cited December 2020 report by the World Bank, Better Jobs, Brighter Futures, Investing in Childcare to Build Human Capital. And that report makes a data-driven case that childcare is central to national efforts to build human capital. So the report established a global need. More than 40% of all children below primary school age, or nearly 350 million children, need childcare but don't have access to it. It established that childcare challenge disproportionately impacts low-income and middle-income countries where 8 out of 10 need childcare but don't have access. For example, a child in a low-income country is nearly 5 times less likely to have access to childcare than a child living in a high-income country. And importantly, as a proportion of GDP, low-income countries and low-middle-income countries are the ones to gain the most, with most increased access to childcare. A recent Gates Foundation investment showed that nationally scaled childcare programs could increase female employment by as many as 5.2 million women in Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Uganda. And so while COVID has laid bare the childcare crisis, we've continually looked to our partners to unlock the solutions and gather data on what works. Our early investments in gender measurement, data, and evidence have helped operationalize new measures and definitions of women's work to make care work more visible. They've generated national estimates of care work, including childcare, especially during COVID, and have tracked changes in policies that measure this care. The data have also helped shape care policies in countries, such as national care policy in Colombia, and we're engaging with governments to inform and support their plans to develop a care policy based on data and evidence in many other places as well. I think one last thing that I would highlight is one of our signature initiatives, which is a new cross-cutting, cross-sectoral work program anchored by the Early Learning Partnership team at the World Bank to accelerate investment in programming in childcare that'll help result in better health, employment, and education outcomes. So we've joined forces with several foundations. Some of them focus on early childhood, some of them focus on gender equality, to really just come together. And we've committed $10 million to invest in this new fund at the bank to provide matching funds and technical assistance to governments to help develop, pilot, and integrate gender-intentional childcare models and programs. It'll help fill knowledge gaps, demonstrate what works, and will help scale it. So we're really excited about this new investment and are eager to continue to talk and partner with folks about this really urgent agenda.
Thanks, Jen. This is really, really exciting. Having myself worked in this area in the past, I am very excited about all the partnerships that are building around it. And definitely, I hope that this space is the beginning of a collaboration with UNDP, Gates, and many other of the partners that are here today around the caregiving agenda in Latin America and the Caribbean, which, as Pablo was saying, is also facing particular challenges and moving ahead in a very interesting direction with a strong focus on gender equality. But now I'm going to turn into Ana Maria. I would like to understand a little bit better, Ana Maria, who are the people that work in the caregiving sector in the region? Now I'm talking about the jobs in caregiving, not the unpaid care at home. Who are they? In what conditions do they work? What type of jobs do they hold? How did the pandemic affect this sector of the workforce? Please tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, I like to think about this topic with the Diamond of Care. The Diamond of Care by Rasavi shows each of the important actors that are there for providing care. So we have the household, we have the state, we have the market, and we have the nonprofit sector. And and all of them have to play a big role in providing care. But in Latin America, it's mostly family oriented. So this situation impacts emotionally and financially on the well-being of the family, and highlights the shortfall of supply of care provided by the other actors. And this is like more visible for the elder care and the care for people with disabilities. This kind of care are mostly done by the families or domestic workers. There's not a comprehensive policies in our region to address all these necessities of the people, the elders, and the people with disabilities. And Paulo was saying that we are aging, and we used to be a region with a lot of young people, but not anymore. We are getting older, and we are going to face a moment when we have a lot of elders and a small group of young people that cannot maintain the elders. So the other actors had to start working in providing care. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible. Nowadays, ECLAC calculates that 12% of the population in Latin America has some type of disability. And World Bank showed that 8 million of elders cannot perform the daily activities, so they need constant care. And most of this care is performed by the families and, of course, by women. So there's another story for children. Latin America has a huge expansion in preschool during the last 2 decades. Still, there are a lot of things to do there in terms of quality. You have a paper about that. And in terms of difference between low-income families and high-income families. So what we have to work in reducing the gap from the beginning, from the early ages. This type of work these are teachers, and these teachers mostly are a woman also. But thinking about the unpaid care that is the most relevant one for elders and people with disabilities, think about a woman in her 40s that want to have a baby, for example. So you are going to end up with your parents, the elders, and also with the baby, and you're in the peak of your productivity. So that is impossible. This person has to sacrifice something, and it's because of the social norms, and this is not efficient. About the pandemic has a huge toll in for example, domestic workers. And we were reviewing in the UNDP the policies that the countries are making, and only 5 have some policies directed at these groups.
Thank you, Ana Maria. That's very interesting, and it's also sobering. I'm gonna switch gears and ask Jen a little bit to tell us about what are the challenges we face when we try to scale up successful interventions that have actually managed to relieve some of the burden of unpaid caregiving. I think scaling up is a key question on these issues. Could you please tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think, in my view, there's probably 3 major challenges worth highlighting today: political will, gender data, and demand. So first, the greatest challenge, I think, to scaling and replicating successful interventions on care is mobilizing the political will necessary. I think I'm pretty optimistic that we're seeing progress on this front, and we were thrilled this summer that the Generation Equality Forum put the issue of care at the forefront of gender and development agendas. There were over 50 care-related commitments made at the Generation Equality Forum, And among those commitments, 17 countries announced investments in care, including Argentina, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, who is one of the hosts of the Generation Equality Forum. And I think one of the most exciting outcomes of the Generation Equality Forum is the establishment of the Global Alliance on Care, which is a coalition of 50 members representing governments, civil society, philanthropy, and multilateral organizations, guided by the vision of realizing a feminist care agenda by 2026. And so this new coalition, I think, is really exciting to have and is open to many countries to continue to join. I think a second important challenge to note is one that the foundation is committed to tackling as well, which is strengthening gender data. One of the core long-standing beliefs of the Gates Foundation is the power of data. And we know that to achieve gender equality, we need to strengthen data systems, improve access to high-quality gender data, and ensure an understanding of its policy implications. Again, one of the commitments that the Global Alliance on Care that I just mentioned is going to tackle is this challenge. The Alliance is committed to promoting the generation of data and evidence on care, including costing studies and measurements on the economic value of care work. And we're also, again, excited that the data from the Early Learning Partnership at the World Bank will continue to build the evidence base in investing in care as a triple win that Anna Maria was referencing as well, that is cross-cutting across not only children and women, but whole economies. And then finally, I'll just say that we will need to contend with the long-standing outdated notions of who cares about care. I think there's too many well-meaning but ultimately uninformed narratives that are stuck on the notion of care as an issue that only impacts the global north, when we know that the data says otherwise, that there's this widespread belief that low and middle income countries aren't ready or can't handle or don't care about these issues. But we know that both from firsthand accounts from women that we've surveyed and into looking into macro and microeconomic trends that this isn't true. Nowhere in the world does a mother not want the best for her child, which means that providing them with safe, affordable, quality care and the ability to be economically empowered outside the home is critical, no matter where you are. So to meet and overcome these challenges, I believe it's imperative that we, governments, donors, civil society, don't revert back to our typical approaches to counter this atypical crisis, but rather we step up to this once-in-a-generation opportunity to really create change.
Thanks, Jen. And now I'm going to ask Pablo to tell us a little bit more. And I think this is something probably you or partners want to hear about. What is it that we in the IDB Group, through our financial and technical products, can offer the region in terms of instruments to address this caregiving crisis that we're hearing about? Can you tell us a little bit more why this is a key piece for the region's economic recovery after the COVID crisis?
Thank you, Caridad. I think we have very clear at the bank in the Vision 2025 the importance of the care economy and of caregiving services to support economic recovery. As Jen mentioned, the pandemic hit women very hard, and the recovery of employment among women has been much slower than among men. So this is a key investment that we need to do that will benefit not only the recipients of care, children and the elderly, but will also allow women to join the labor market and to participate actively and to promote and sustain the economic recovery that the region very, very badly needs. At the IDB, we're very uniquely positioned to work with our partners because this is a very complex issue and we have the operational experience, we are generating the knowledge, and we have a very clear sense that we need innovation, we need participation from the private sector, and this relates, for example, to the gender parity initiative. And also, we need a lot of robust institutional building. This is a sector that is under construction, and we can provide the guidance to have intelligent regulations to promote sustainable financing of these systems and to work with partners. We have, for example, a partnership with the French Development Agency and an aging facility that is providing technical assistance regionally and in specific countries to build these systems, build the blocks of the care economy, and being able to provide and define quality services that will, this is a win-win situation because people that receive care will receive better quality, family members and unpaid caregivers will be relieved from some of these duties, and then we will also be creating and supporting jobs. So we are very excited, for example, in the IDB lab, We had a challenge recently in the context of the silver economy, where we have very interesting innovations from people across the region in Jamaica and Mexico, for example, coming up with solutions to provide better ideas on how to deal with this. But we have all the elements and the partnerships in the region to continue this work, and this is going to be, again, key for the economic recovery in the region.
Thank you, Pablo. That was a very comprehensive explanation, and I think it's also encouraging for us all the work ahead. I think this is an important agenda and an agenda where we have a very strong commitment with. We are actually doing great in terms of time, and before giving each of the panelists a few more minutes to share any final reflections with you, I was also wanting to bring up an issue that we haven't discussed yet, which is how can we get more men involved in caregiving? What do we know about interventions that work to also start changing those social norms? So I'm going to go around giving our panelists a couple more minutes to share any thoughts, and I would invite them to share any ideas they might have on this important issue. Jen, do you want to go first?
Sure, and thank you again so much for inviting me to join this panel. I would just say one last reflection that I would share is that, we definitely feel the urgency of this moment, but this is a long-standing issue, and I think the data that we've all pointed to today has been the result of many, many years of hard work and dedication to this. And so I would urge us not only to take advantage of this moment in time to make real change and to crowd in others to this urgent agenda, but to really continue investing in this as a research agenda, as a policy agenda, and know that we're definitely in a moment of crisis, but we have a moment of opportunity that goes beyond just this unique moment in time. And in terms of your really good question about bringing in others to this conversation, I think it's great to have allies, of course, in this fight as well, and to, again, reframe this not as an issue that is solely focused on women, but also an issue that has great implications for the rest of society. So definitely agree that we need to bring in the voices, the thought leadership of our male allies into the conversation and continue to show that this is an issue that spans across geographies, across genders, across all sorts of social economic boundaries, and it will be critical for us all to play a part in that.
Thanks, Jen. Pablo, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Caridad. I think that this is a key issue, and one of the experiences we have in the bank is working with Uruguay, where there was a very clear message or clear decision that caregiving is a shared responsibility between women and men, and that regulations need to change. For example, parental leave regulations, making parents need to take the time from their careers to be able to provide care to children. So there's a very large area in terms of regulation that needs to be worked on, and also in the social norms. There has to be an idea that caregiving is not, and I try to be careful in imposing this. It's not that we're going to create jobs for women. We're going to create good jobs that women and men need to take, and will be an opportunity for all of them. So I think that emphasizing that these are careers, for example, nursing is a career that men can perfectly well do and have successful career paths. So this needs to be emphasized, as well as the change in the social norms. And I think we've seen that it takes the social norms do change. They take time, but with the right effort and with tenacity, I think we're going to be able to see this in the near future.
Thanks, Pablo. Ana Maria, any last thoughts?
Well, I want to mention three things that I think that this is the moment to start the conversation about investing in care infrastructure that already started in US, and that give us a moment for the Latin America to start thinking about that. It raises income and brings productivity like the usual traditional infrastructure. So I think that if we want to start making our economies work, we have not just to invest in the usual things that was the traditional infrastructure, that is roads and construction, because we have this problem that women have been very affected, or more than men affected by the pandemic. So we need to work with them and help them to get into the economy again. The other thing that we need to work is in the stereotypes and the social norms science school, and that this is going to address the problem of segregation of occupations and professions by sex. We have to allow men and women to have a big portfolio of options, that you don't end up in a sector just because you're sex. You end up because you feel that this sector is going to fulfill you, and you can bring a lot of things to this sector. And the last one is that we need to have gender perspective in public policy. For example, all the macroeconomic models that we use to make a public policy, they forget about the care sector. We have to include the care sector in these macroeconomic models. Otherwise, all the public the policymakers are going to forget about the care sector. And if they forget about the care sector, we forget about women.
Thank you, Ana Maria. I think these have been very, very insightful remarks to close this session. I think I have learned a lot from the three panelists. And once again, I want to thank Jen, Ana Maria, and Pablo for being here with us today and sharing the so many dimensions of this very, very complex issue. But as Ana Maria was saying, an issue where this is the moment to address. We cannot postpone it any further. And just like Latin America has led in many ways the discussion in other areas of social policy, even around the world, cash transfers, some of the areas of early childhood, I think there's a lot of potential to also invest, think, innovate in terms of thinking of a region that builds a strong caregiving system that can support not only the current generation, but especially the generations to come for a more sustainable development. Thank you very much to all of you, and thanks again to our participants. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Caridad and Pablo, as well as our valued partners at UNDP and the Gates Foundation for this insightful and timely session.